There are so many words I could use to describe Berserk, from amazing to downright godly. I have nothing but respect and praise for this series, and honestly, it's become a bit of an obsession. To call it my favorite manga would grossly undersell the sheer impact of Berserk. Berserk is not just my favorite manga, but it is my favorite form of media to date. It is incredible, right down from the breathtaking story to the incredibly diverse and multi-dimensional characters. Every moment hits, and I could argue that almost every word that comes out of character's mouth deserves a dissection of its own. It just tells a beautiful story about the weight of loss and the descent of morality, wrapped up in the godly bow that is Miura's art. But I'm not here to talk about how perfect Berserk is, because trust me, that is something that deserves a whole feature film of its own. What I'm here to do is talk about one thing, and one thing only. The moment that changed manga forever. That changed Berserk forever. And that is the Eclipse. When I was a boy, I suffered from a terrible case of claustrophobia. Claustrophobia, if you're unaware, is a fear of small spaces. I know it sounds dumb and beyond anything rather immature. Unfortunately, such rationale was foreign for the better half of my childhood. I hated small spaces, and I remember every time I used to go in an elevator, I could have this small panic attack. This phobia was birthed when I was a little boy visiting my uncle in the hospital, and him and a few patients getting stuck in an elevator. And all my childhood brain could think of is that they were trapped and I would never see them again. When I think of the Eclipse from Berserk, I have that same feeling I did then, the utter, devastating feeling of being trapped. Closed off from the rest of the world and there being no escape. That quite literally is what the Eclipse is, right down from the visual details to the series of events. An entrapment beyond comprehension and an agent of despair. Because that is the Eclipse. True, unadulterated despair. Even from the beginning of Volume 12, we feel this despair. The beginning of the end before we even know it. Everyone is wondering what the Band of the Hawk will become, now that they revealed that Griffith is effectively of no use a leader, both physically and mentally crippled, that their mission to save Griffith was for nothing, and that they had only led themselves to their end, the architects of their own doom. Miura, bless his soul, sows the seeds of this eclipse before we even know that such things exist in the Berserk universe. Most importantly, he makes sure we know that Griffith will never be the same. Griffith is like us, the audience, feeling trapped. He knows he will never be able to do the things that he once could. Crippled due to his torture at the Tower of Conviction, and mentally broken, he can never build that kingdom he dreamed of. He can never lead the Band of the Hawk again. He, in all ways, is trapped to his condition, forced to this cruel stagnation. Where he once commanded respect for the Band of the Hawk, they now speak of him like a wasted individual. He is trapped, and if not for the Eclipse, he truly would have died inside at that moment. But as we are to find out, causality is a friend to Griffith, and his entrapment will soon become his liberation. The beginning of Eclipse I always find to be the beginning of probably the most perfect climax in media. You rarely get that sense that the moment, this exact moment, was made for Griffith, that everything was suited for him. From the moment his dreams ran away from him, it runs from the moral realms of reality to something bigger, something godly, something that knows no good and no evil. I love the lead up to the Eclipse, not just from a story point of view, but from a visual point of view. The literal eclipse that preludes the event, giving it its name, is probably the perfect visual motif Miura could have chosen for this truly disgusting event that is about to take place. And to welcome him into this rebirth is the army of their dead, to welcome their new demon king, a perversion of the biblical tradition of Christ's welcoming of angels. And then amongst everything is the striking visual of the beheaded scream. I cannot tell you how unnerving this moment is, and almost godly this innovation is. Almost everything is flipped on its head and with one scream introduced to the world of the Eclipse and in the definition of the uncanny valley. Instantly, once we are transported into the world of the Eclipse, everything goes wrong. The world as we know it is going to be replaced with this horrific and visceral environment. Instantly, the sky and ground are replaced with the uncanny spread of faces swirling and contorting into some grotesque whirlwind of despair and pain. Screaming and crying in this vortex of souls, a ceiling of horror, and quite literally knows no ends, trapping us as the reader and the characters, almost as if they're buried in this nightmarish setting, which would not be too far from the truth, as quite literally they are in the lowest levels of the astral world. And in the 1997 anime, the scene just sells it. You rarely get that sense of a claustrophobic environment, making you squirm and quiver. Before we know what is about to happen, we know nothing is good. This is an audience of sacrifice. And as soon as those words are uttered, sacrifice, we know the end is nigh. As those army of dead transform and configure into demons and monsters that we have never seen before in the world of Berserk. Griffith is both literally and figuratively raised to godhood, and the hand of God raises him up from the jumble of faces. This imagery is so striking and beyond me how Miura, one man, can manipulate so many visual motifs to move the narrative of the story without feeling excessive or arrogant. This exaltation of Griffith is not only gut-wrenching, but feels so right yet so wrong. This is his ambition, this is the child. It is everything he's ever wanted, the boy wanting to see the castle, build it and experience it. It's there right for the taking. All he has to do is let go. That's all it takes. One word. It really is a showcase of Miura's storytelling, and I explore so many perspectives. We see Griffith in this adoring light. To see Griffith's dream resolved and him willing to build that mountain of bodies is so shocking yet so understandable. What he does is all for his dream, and he will not betray it again. So one last smile at Guts. He forsakes his life of Griffith and rises as Femto. And with that smile, true horror begins as the apostles stare into the band of the Hawk, devouring them and torturing them in the sick, nocturnal feast. It's devastating and utterly horrifying to see all these men that once fought for Griffith to be betrayed and killed. It hurts more knowing that none of these men deserved it. The death of Judah is probably the saddest and most terrifying one. Not the way he dies, as I could argue Pippin's was more gruesome, having his whole inside hollowed out from the back. But Judah stands out. He was someone that always followed the Band of Hawk, trying his best to keep it together. He was there when Griffith wasn't. He was there when Guts wasn't. Even when everyone thinks of leaving Griffith, he and Casca are the only ones that are willing to stand by his side. It hurts more knowing that he died never achieving all the things he wanted to. He couldn't even get his last words right. Couldn't even tell Casca how he felt, really showing that no one is safe in the world of Berserk is an utterly cruel one. Despair is only highlighted more in the capture and assault of Casca, and Guts' desperate attempts to stop it. This part really breaks me, not only for its depictions of Casca's assault and Guts' futility, his struggle, but they both have watched their friends die, and now they have to suffer their own individual fates. That not even death is granted to them. Not even that is a delight. Griffith reborn as Femto looks so inhuman, and what he does is even more inhuman. That was Miura's way of showing that Griffith was really gone and all there was Femto, and what he was anything but human. He takes back the respect he lost and contorts it into a vicious and disturbing act, violating Casca. Griffith's acts can only be described as sadistic. It was a sadistic power move to show Guts and Casca that they were useless to his power, and they were only ever a horrific means to an end. Especially Guts, as he forces the demons to pin him down and makes Guts watch hopelessly as the love of his life is violated by the man he called his closest friend. What makes it even more tragic is, as a boy, Guts was a victim to this nature of assault by the hands of Donovan, and he as a boy could do nothing about it. He now watches someone he cares for more than himself about to suffer the same fate he did, and he can do nothing about it. He can only watch as this tragic and grotesque act happens. He went as far as to cut off his own arm to try and stop what happened to Casca. He tried with every fiber of his being to stop it and just couldn't. It haunts him every day that he couldn't do anything about it. And it obviously haunts Casca as, after that event, she lost all her memories and reverted back to the mental state of a child for almost 4 years. It is the definition of horror and despair. It is something that had come as a surprise to the story of Berserk, gaining the reputation as the most intense climaxes in anime and manga history, and this was only by its second arc. It is something which Miura had been preparing since the Black Swordsman arc. He didn't want some cheap trick flashback, but a fleshed out story and explanation as to why Guts was the way he is in the Black Swordsman arc, and who the God Hand were, and why he hated them so much. Miura crafted an event so brutal, so cruel, that he couldn't help but sit back in shock. The visceral nightmare he created, and us, as an audience, experienced. We felt just as angry as Guts, and still to this day, I hate Griffith. The Eclipse is what a climax should be, impactful and groundbreaking. As an audience, we can only hope that one day we get a resolution, that Guts can move on from this nightmare, and him and Casca can finally be happy. So I say, rest in peace, struggler, and so long. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. I know it's a lot more serious than my other videos. This manga is really special to me, and I just wanted to share how I felt about it, and I wanted to share a very visceral moment. I hope it wasn't too much for you, and I hope it got your brain thinking. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and remember, stay safe. We bout.